Talk briefly about some of the things that you're proudest of that you did as treasurer.
Well, before I was treasurer, I helped establish a housing court in Cleveland. When I was a student at Oberlin College back in 1976, I wrote a term paper on the need to have a housing court in Cleveland and worked with a young state senator named Charlie Butts, who worked with me on translating the idea into a bill. The bill passed in 1979. I went to Columbus many times and testified as a young councilman on the need for a housing court. That's been, I think, in many respects, a game changer. But the things I think we're proudest about in the treasurer's office was we were first to call the foreclosure crisis, maybe in the country, one of the first public officials to really raise the red flag. I was visited by Jay Westbrook and Mike Polensek and a bunch of city council members in the summer of 2000 on the foreclosure crisis. Worked with people at Cleveland State, saw the data, stunning information about how this foreclosure thing was out of control. Went to the Federal Reserve Bank at Cleveland, had a big meeting, had hoped that Alan Greenspan would listen to us. That was kind of naive. And I think I was one of the first people in the country, testified in Congress many times, state legislatures, raised the red flag, the warning signs that it's coming, it's going to crash the economy, it's going to ruin these neighborhoods. And eventually I wasn't the only voice, but I might have been the first. So we started a foreclosure prevention program in Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, first of its kind in the country that I think was really successful. The explosion of vacant properties was something that required special legislation for a new bill, House Bill 294, that I wrote with a guy named Des Frangos and Bob Rink, that expedited the foreclosure of properties that were tax delinquent and abandoned, which had become a real problem as a result of the foreclosure crisis. First in the state to do that. Probably proudest of the land bank, what I'm probably best known for. If the foreclosure crisis was a war, we had basically lost the war by 2006, 2007. We were first in the country in foreclosures from 2000 through 2006. Cleveland was emptying out 487,000 people in Cleveland in 2000, probably about 375,000 now. As people were leaving, these houses were going dark. And we were looking for the best way to deal with thousands of vacant properties. And we came upon this idea of a county land bank from Michigan. Brought the idea to Ohio, rewrote it, introduced it through Tom Patton and Matt Dolan in January of 2008. Went to Columbus, slept on benches outside of legislative chambers, and lobbied day and night for 10 months, got it passed in December of 2008. We opened up the doors on the first county land bank in June of 2009. And in my current role, I've helped to establish 15 more land banks with about 8 in the queue, and have used land banks to raise the awareness on this issue, both locally, statewide, and nationally.
And it's something that you've transitioned into as a private citizen. It's an issue that you have not abandoned. It is still.
I work for the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, which is a land conservation organization. The visionary leader of that group, a guy named Rich Cochran, said, look, I can preserve all the land I want in Geauga County and out in Ashtabula, but we can't ignore the urban areas that make up our footprint, 14 counties. Would you help establish land banks in the Western Reserve? So we did. We've obviously gone around the state. But just in the past 2 years, we were able to get Mike DeWine to commit $75 million from a lawsuit for demolition, which with leveraging of local communities was $122 million, and went to the U.S. Treasury Department and got the Treasury Department to recognize that this is their problem. And they committed $60 million from a fund called the Hardest Hit Funds. So we got $182 million raised, and we're about $800 million short, but we're going to stay at it. And we have a network now of land banks statewide, and we stay at it.
Let's talk a little bit about what you see in this region's future, and specifically the city of Cleveland. Some parts of Cleveland continue to empty out 5 years after the housing crisis,
and they will, and they'll continue to empty out.
Well, what should the city's long-term strategy be? Is it to repopulate, or is it to try and
They have to recognize the reality of a city that's emptying out. And the reason I have focused in so much on this issue of vacant properties is that I think there will be a new Cleveland. I believe there will. I believe in my heart there will be a new city. My kids will see it, and my grandchildren, if I have any, will see it. But you're not going to build an old city till you take a lot of the old one down. Not because I believe in destroying Cleveland's history. It's not because I want to take down all those architectural gems. It's because we have way too much supply and not enough demand, and we don't have the resources to board up 10,000 houses for the day that people decide to move back. So the millennials and whatever they call the next generation are going to redefine Northeast Ohio and Cleveland. Cleveland will continue to shrink. We're at 375 now. I think we bottom out somewhere between 325,000. But it's important that we begin to remove the debris of prior generations. It's become debris. It was history, now it's debris. Let's clear the decks and let's try to create a palette, if you will, a canvas, a clean canvas, so we can paint a new city. And I don't know what that city will be. I know that these millennials believe in connectivity. They like to have green space, which my organization fully believes in. You have the opportunity to create green space where there hasn't been green space since the days of Moses Cleveland, maybe Grover Cleveland too, wrong Cleveland. So, but we have to go at this blight, and not just commercial, not just residential, but the commercial stuff too. So let's take it all down. And then the iconic images of Cleveland and Detroit, where it's too late, will not be a vacant and distressed property. It's going to be a green space and a place where people want to come back because they find it inviting. I'm not naive. You know the old saying, give a carpenter a hammer and the whole world is a nail. Creating green space doesn't solve the problems of lack of jobs, doesn't solve the problems of the broken urban family, bad education, poverty. It doesn't solve that. But it creates an environment that I think is conducive to a better way of life, a better way of living. And the problem is no longer Cleveland's. Hopefully it'll get us to start thinking about regionalism in a way we never have. People in the suburbs always said it's us and it's them. That's Cleveland's problem. That's not our problem. Racial issues, housing, education, poverty. Well, guess what? It's not everybody's problem, because the emptying out of the inner city and predatory lending, which went from being a Cleveland-only phenomenon to a phenomenon that worked its way into the inner ring suburbs, is now begun to damage some of those things as well. So let's look at this thing regionally. Ultimately, the best solution is we adopt a regional form of government the way they did in Louisville, Kentucky, where it's not just Louisville and 20 burbs, it's Louisville. I think they pronounce it Louisville, whatever they do. So it's one big city that looks more like a county. Now, I may be dreaming, and that may not happen in my lifetime, but we have to start to define this as the region and not just the city of Cleveland.
You think it has to get better, worse before it gets better, before people recognize it?
Yes, and I think it is getting worse. I mean, I think what you're learning, especially if you talk to inner ring suburban mayors, is that they are experiencing the same problems that Cleveland had 10 years ago. Talking about vacancy, we're talking about abandoned properties, we're talking about crime, talking about some tense racial issues that are helping to redefine communities like Cleveland Heights, where they've started to cancel fairs because they can't control. I mean, there's a lot of going on here. Shaker Heights. Shaker Heights. You got to talk to the mayor in Shaker. He'll tell you that there are parts, especially the areas that border Cleveland, where they are really, really struggling. No, it's not just a Cleveland-only problem.
So are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic?
Let's talk about the picture of Cleveland. Not all of Cleveland is that distressed. I happen to be in Ohio City, which is a vibrant community. It's amazing to me, the energy in this community. I'm here every day. I call it the center of the universe. I'm at 25th and Lorraine here. Detroit Shoreway, Tremont, neighborhoods that continue to hold on like West Park downtown is booming. So it's not a completely bleak picture, but it is. So there are success stories within the larger picture. In general, I'm optimistic, but we're going to have to this education issue, this new school administration, making college, higher ed affordable. So these kids come out and can buy a house. Here's the irony. If you're a kid coming out of college now, you could afford to buy a house because in some cases, owning is cheaper than renting. But the student debt burden that these kids are facing is making it virtually impossible to do anything except maybe live with mom and dad or work an extra job just to make the college loan payments. Optimistic, yeah, but we can't do this alone. City government won't solve this alone. It has to be the whole picture. Schools, jobs. We have to get the business community to recognize success in a city like Cleveland is not measured by what your convention center looks like. We keep following these old standard formulas. If we build a new convention center, if we build a new hotel, and if we build more stadiums, and I've been part of that problem, the stadiums for sure, that somehow people will come back and it'll be a better city. And it is for some, but not for many.